Okay, Deputy Kenny is next.
Yeah, thanks, Cathaoirleach. I'd like to welcome Mr. Owen Reedy from SIPTU and Dermot O'Leary from the NBRU to the Transport Committee. I agree with entirely with what Owen Reedy said about the need for a public debate on public transport. I don't think we had one. I think this committee meeting, since I was elected at all in 2011, is the first meeting where we've had a serious debate around public transport and about the role of public transport in the economy and its importance. I agree personally that the direct award model is the better model. We have seen, as was been pointed out, the performance targets that have been set. I'm talking about Dublin Bus in particular because as a Dublin deputy, that would be the company that I'd be more familiar with, that they're hitting performance targets of 95 to 98%. If something is working well, why change it? If it's working, don't break it. And one would question the need to do that. I think a lot of the debate goes back to, and I know Deputy Julia has suddenly left, but it goes back to the 2009 legislation which set up the National Transport Authority, and under that legislation the NTA are proposing to outsource or to put out for tender 10% of the routes. Now I understand that the bus companies themselves can actually tender for that 10% as well. So you know, in theory, now how that works in practice I don't know. But there are, of course, as has been pointed out, there is a body of opinion out there which I don't share, and I know you don't share, that more than 10% should go out for tendering, and that's a fact I think we have to recognise the political realities. There is one or two things I agree with you, and I agree about this idea about the public debate and how we could continue that, and I'd like to hear your views on that. I'd also like to take up a point you made about the possible effects of putting the routes out to tender, and would the new operators provide the same level of service to the customer, to the travelling public. You mentioned wheelchair accessibility. I think that's a key point, because at this committee, when the Minister was present, I did raise the fact that there are services provided in this city to Dublin Airport, Aircoach, or they call it First Bus now. They do not provide wheelchair services on their routes. And they have been asked by the Minister and by the Department a number of times to do that. Now, if they can get away with it, other operators might do the same. It's all about a wheelchair space takes up the space of 3 able passengers. So obviously there's an economics at play. And I know people who have gone to Aircoach or First Bus and asked would they take could they take a wheelchair passenger. They were told to go to Dublin Bus. They'll carry you. So I think that kind of situation, we need a level playing field, and clearly there isn't a level playing field in relation to the provision of services to the public in that area. I think this question of how this works out over the period of time, I think it'll be 2015 before the tendering process is completed, and it will be 2016 before the actual new operators come into place. So I think there is we have some time in this area to carefully monitor and to watch how that develops, and I would be interested in your views on how we should all approach that. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thanks. Anyone want to respond?
I'd like to respond to the Deputy's comments. First, by welcoming the comments regarding the Deputy's view that direct award model should be used. Regarding a level playing field, I think that is the nub of the particular problem that we now face. I represent workers in the private bus companies as well, and we should not forget that particular fact. And everything being equal, when a tender goes out to tender, the current incumbent companies have pension liabilities to their employees, and everything being equal, they cannot compete because the price of the bus, the price of fuel, etc., should be the same. And when it comes to a level playing field, they are not starting off at the same place. And then our concerns are that going forward, it's a dangerous gamble that the NTA are taking, because as Deputy Dooley alluded to, economies of scale then come into play, and the bigger private bus companies will then have the propensity to get the majority of these routes as time goes forward. And that's going to actually rule out the smaller bus companies competing as well. And we could see end up in the future with a monopoly of private bus companies. And all evidence to date shows that when you have that, standards, customer service and usage falls. And that's where we are. And your last question or last comment was, you know, about a better approach. Our view would be that more time needs to be given to this, more debate needs to be had, more consultation should take place, because this gamble is taking place at the taxpayers' expense, at the consumers' expense, and at our members' workers' expense. Because if contracts are going to be changing on a regular and ongoing basis, and even the NTA themselves said in their own proposal that if Bus Éireann do not get these contracts or get a number of these contracts, voluntary severances will have to apply, or 2-pay will have to apply. And both of those is going to end job security for workers, and both of them is going to end up with driver standards down.
Yeah, I think the big problem with this is that we have never, as a state, as a parliamentary system, we have never actually got down to discussing what a national transport plan should be. It's always been ad hoc. We talk about ideological aims in relation to the present proposals, but we must remember the CIE was established for pragmatic reasons. And I prefer, and trade union colleagues prefer, to actually look at this from a purely pragmatic point of view. Although I could have present a social democratic view, I prefer a pragmatic one. We've not only, the Deputy Kenny has talked about, well, it could have been more, could have been, yes, it could have been more if Fine Gael had been in a right-wing coalition, but we are where we are. But what has not been addressed is that there is no plan, there's no business plan to justify what we're doing at this particular minute. We cannot say that the taxpayer, that the state will benefit from it. And worse, we can't say how this will affect a national strategic aims in relation to regions, in relation to urban travel, and in relation to dealing with rural isolation. Because there are unintended consequences to these proposals, which haven't been considered. If up till now the commercial services in Bus Éireann for many years contributed, cemented the PSO services because they were underfunded. Once the licenses which have been that have been distributed the way they have in the last couple of years, this has affected the bottom line of Bus Éireann. They've been reduced to pulling out of locations, villages and hamlets and areas like that as a consequence of that. And this will occur again because nobody knows what's going to happen once you start at removing elements and components of networks. Because when we talk about public transport provision, we forget two things. There's a difference between just a bus service, A to B. Anybody can make money on that if you've got the right corridor. And the other thing is much more sophisticated and much more socially desirable, and that is a network. And what Bus Éireann provides is a national integrated network. So if you start taking pieces, bits and pieces of that, one doesn't know where that'll end. That could have an effect because of economies of scale being attacked. You have then services having to be taken out. All the things that was never intended to do. In relation to Dublin Bus, and I'm conscious that the deputy is from Dublin, nobody is making allowances for the fact that Bus Éireann, or Dublin Bus, may have its own particular problems. We're talking about 2-pay, pensions, and comfort, the letter of comfort, by the way, which was there as a consequence of the 1986 Transport Act. But leaving that aside, I think it would be unfair if the changes in the Dublin area, if they are not financially neutral in relation to Dublin Bus, that they should have the right and should be given every opportunity to expand its services, because we've retrenched because of the recession. But we need to be able to provide capacity for our customers. All that going into the future, and we're not sure about that. Just to finish off, I'm conscious of the time. What we have forgotten in relation to the Bus Éireann situation is that once you remove the little surpluses, the economy of scales, the administration, all those sort of stuff, then the social dividend which Bus Éireann has been providing in relation to isolated villages and stops and things like that also goes. And the state has to pick it up, because our commercial services on the expressway, we have to compete on a level playing ground with the private operators. And when we do that, that means that areas are left out. And those areas then become subject to PSOs in their own right. And once again, the state picks them up, because these are the hidden costs that are never discussed. There's no like judgment, because there's it's never quantified how we tender, the price that goes into tendering, administering, and monitoring the tendering process. Nothing is said about the areas that we leave behind, and nothing is said about the overall policy of integration, sustainability of services, and all the rest. All that is forgotten in the rush to what we say is fulfilling a simple ideological aim.
Does anyone wish to? Yeah.
Just in relation to Deputy Kenny's comments, Deputy Kenny will be aware, being a Dublin deputy, and he mentioned Dublin Bus, and he mentioned the lack of wheelchair accessibility on air coach stroke first group. The deputy will obviously be aware that the Dublin Bus fleet, as I understand it, is 100% wheelchair accessible. In relation to your
100% paid for by the taxpayer, isn't that right?
Well,
that's the difference. They got a subsidy to do it, air coach didn't.
We're either in favour of wheelchair accessibility or not. I'll come back to it, Deputy Barron. In terms of the comment by Deputy Kenny in relation to the direct award, of course, obviously from the trade union side and both our submissions, we obviously would favour a situation where we would, as I said in my opening remarks, we return to a situation where we were in discussions to facilitate the entry of private operators into the market. Unfortunately, time has since passed, long since passed. A decision is a decision. Again, evidence from some of the countries that we would look at in Europe would say the initial tender would be obviously competitive. Of course, it would. And my colleague, Mr. Newman, referred to the very simple fact that there's a pension liability attached to Dublin Bus and Bus Éireann that wouldn't be attached to any private company bidding or tendering for any routes. But inevitably, the cost in the second and third and subsequent tenders would rise. And have risen across Europe in terms of tendering for bus routes.
Okay. Okay. Oh, yeah, do you want to come in, Peter? It's just that I'm conscious of others wanting to get in. We have to let in.
Could I I'm from Waterford City myself, so could I just say that Waterford, as you know, in the NTA proposal, the whole of the city is being given out. It's not 10%. And it will work out at 20% loss of jobs in the Waterford depot if we didn't win the contract which we're allowed to go for the tender. Now, we all know here, as sure as night follows day, is that the lowest tender is going to get the contract. I mean, that's nearly in every walk of life. But just a quick one on that. If and when the Waterford city services go and we lose that amount of employees, we're then left with our expressway, which is a commercial. We have no problem at all. As a matter of fact, in the city of Waterford, there's 2 other bus companies which are there for years and years on the city service as competitors. No problem at all. We also, which is no problem at all either, on the expressway. But we don't have a level playing field on the expressway. Lately, and I'm sure it has come to some TDs around the country, or senators, or councillors, is that the private companies are not accepting free bus passes on their services, their non-stop services to airports, to bypassing small towns. They're not accepting. I'm at the meeting myself personally. I'm going on your bus. The other one is not taking bus passes. So we were talking earlier, sorry, about low-floor bus and Senator Sean.
The reason they're not accepting them is it because they're not getting anything for them?
Oh, they will get them for them, but they're just not accepting because they can fill their bus with cash customers, which is cherry picking, which is the race to the bottom. So, which will leave our expressway services, which I say have no problem at all with competition, but will leave our expressway services with all due respect to the passengers. We have no problem at all. We're carrying passengers, disabled passengers, etc. And you don't have to have a wheelchair to be disabled. Very courteous to bring passengers around the country and have done for years. But to be left with this situation, it's in Cork, you get on the bus in Cork with cash and you get off into Dublin Airport. You cannot get on the private bus with a bus pass. And that should have been highlighted by the Transport Committee years ago.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much.